I just so happen to find myself getting enveloped in content that focused on dunking on a new group of ridiculous people online called SJWs, or Social Justice Warriors. Now, these videos were not overtly political, at least not from what I could tell. It mostly came off as the same as, like, any other making fun of crazy people video. You know, like any like public
because they're crazy,
meltdown
yeah.
type stuff. Like it wasn't
It kind of makes
anything
sense.
political in my eyes. Certainly not anything.
Well, it's interesting that he says they weren't political because like a lot of people who were involved in making anti-SJW content. I mean, I guess that's true. They maybe were not imparting some specific political orientation, but they were, because what they were arguing for was liberalism. They were arguing for free speech.
Freedom.
And it's just,
yeah,
and freedom. And it's interesting.
We
because
want boobs in our
early
video
days,
games. We want boobs on our comic books and our movies.
And in the early days of this,
and then
people,
the No Boobs Committee came in.
People didn't understand or know that the SJW stuff was Marxist indoctrination. People were just unaware of that for the most part. And so these videos seemed apolitical, but they never really were. They were never apolitical.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, Xander Hall, he's missing context, which is just based on his age. I mean, it's not an insult against him. It's just how it is. You know, he's missing the fact that the reason that this anti-SJW wave happened in, 2012 or 2014 or whatever, the reason that it happened is because people online, they had been, first of all, the internet was much more of a Wild West back then than it is now. And even more so back in like 2005. But people, they were used to seeing the religious right come after them for censorship.
Yes.
Everyone remembers that 2007 Fox News report, at least if you're old enough. The Fox News report where they're like, you see blue boobs in Mass Effect 1. They're coming for our children. This is ridiculous. And it's like, all right. And so people made fun of that a lot. So the idea, it wasn't necessarily anti-left. It was just anti-censorship.
Right.
And when people on the left started being censorious, people who were, say, pro-free speech started just targeting whoever was the censor. It doesn't matter what political side the censor was on. They were just targeting the censors.
Right.
And then younger people like Xander Hall, who don't have this context with the religious right of the 90s, they thought that it was like anti-leftism, but it wasn't, at least not necessarily.
Right. No, that's very true. That's very true.
Anything right-leaning. And this sort of just got normalized. Like what an SJW is, like being a crazy feminist lefty person, just sort of became a staple stereotype of a person that you knew about on the internet, right?
Good.
And progressively, the SJW started to become this boogeyman, and it stopped being a let's dunk on random people online thing and became a people are actually trying to build serious political careers talking about politics and giving commentary, and are kickstarting these careers bitching about the SJWs.
Well, that didn't really happen all that much, though. I know Dankula ran for office. He didn't get it. Sargon ran for office. He didn't get it. Cenk ran for office. He didn't get it. I mean, these people kickstarted careers as content creators, sometimes as news people. Sargon's gone quite official. Good for him. But I don't think they've started political careers. I don't think that's the case.
Right.
I don't know what he means by that. So it's ambiguous.
Well, he gets the order of operations and intentions wrong, because basically what happened was, so you had all the woke stuff come, you had all these anti-SJW channels pop up. But as we got closer to the 2016 election, and it became more apparent that generally it was the left that was defending political correctness and SJWs, and it was generally the right that wasn't, things kind of split along those tribal lines of, well, we had this election coming up. Who are you going to side with? And so that kind of pushed people into being more overtly political in certain directions. And it kind of had this situation where you had, well, some people or a lot of people moved to the right because they viewed SJW stuff as coming from the left, which it was. And then it kind of, you had this, this group of people who didn't really want to move to the right, but now felt politically homeless in this weird space of like, we've been complaining about SJWs in the mainstream for, 2 to 3 years. Where do we go from here? And then that's when the open arms of socialism kind of came and said, hey, do you want to criticize the mainstream media, but also be on the left, come over here, folks. And that's kind of the division that happened. I don't think anyone, right, exactly. I don't think anyone, was building their platform on being an anti-SJW, and they're like, okay, now's the time finally to reveal my true right-wing power level to my audience and use this to leverage political gain.
I think a couple people did. I mean, I know Fuentes, he had like a minor part during Gamergate.
Yeah, there are extreme examples of this that, like, Milo, obviously, even though he's gone much further right than he started, but
yes.
But like Sargon and Count Dankula and like the people that we think of as YouTubers generally, none of them did any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, I admit I was very impressionable. I was a teenager, after all, and I found myself sort of falling down a rabbit hole of content that led from anywhere from pretty just making fun of SJWs, but still quite progressive. Sean Head's content, Chris Ray Gun's content, and eventually through collaborations, the YouTube recommended algorithm, etc., I naturally ended up finding myself watching your Andy Worskis, your Lauren Southerns, your.
By the way, he's kind of lying about this. It's not the YouTube algorithm that sent him down that rabbit hole, because I go over a study later in the video that he actually comments on and agrees with me that it's not. It's not YouTube's algorithm that does this.
I just keep wondering why you can't make this exact same video with gender ideology. Like, I fell down the gender ideology pipeline and I didn't have gender dysphoria, but I ended up on HRT. Like, why can't
you? Completely could. We've heard this story before from detransitioners.
Yeah, but all the detransitioners, they get shut out,
right?
Castigated, shunned.
Yeah,
this guy's like idolized. Oh my God, he escaped. He escaped listening to Ben Shapiro for the rest of his life. Yeah, I mean, it's so weird.
And he says, I guess his big dark turn to the alt-right was Andy Worski and Lauren Southern. And these are weird examples because, I mean, like, yeah, I guess, Lauren Southern was more to the right than most, especially back in those days. But like Andy Worski wasn't very right-wing at all.
He's apolitical. He just makes content that he thinks is going to get views. So.
Yeah, unless he's referring to like when Andy had the blood sports with JF, but I don't.
Yes.
I think he's referring to when Andy just made videos with his roommate, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah,
and that stuff was not very right wing at all.
Yeah, so you're talking about Chris Worski, and he was just doing skits with Chris Worski,
right? With Chris, yes.
Yeah, he started the podcast with JF, and it was pretty right wing. Like he's definitely more
because of JF. Sure. Like JF was a huge force and basically took the reins, and I think they even split up because JF was like, no, we're going to go in this direction, and Worski was like, I would like to have some say in my own show.
Yeah he ended up like he moved in with Ethan Ralph for a while, and Ethan Ralph's pretty far right wing at this point. Like a lot of the people who were there's a picture of Sargon and Chris Ray Gun and Mundane Matt and Andy Worski and a bunch of other people. They're all holding up a Kekistan flag in like 2015 or something.
How are you defining right wing? I'm just curious.
How am I defining right wing?
Yeah, because you say he's right wing, but I don't remember Andy Worski ever making like an overtly political video in my life. So aside from maybe casually using gamer words, are we saying that people who use gamer words are right wing by nature? Or I don't necessarily know how you're defining right wing.
I'm trying to remember.
And the thing that I'm nervous about is a lot of right wing people get defined as racist, which I do think that the racist, people who are ethnocentric are definitely on the right, but people on the right are not all ethnocentric.
Yes, of course.
And I would not categorize Andy Worski as ethnocentric just because, famous, the guy he did videos with, I think, was Asian.
Yes. It's just, okay, I'm not gonna, here. I will not stake my entire personality that Andy Worski is the worst possible fact.
I don't want to, I could care less about Andy Worski. I'm more interested in the concept of what are we defining as right wing?
I'm pretty sure I recall, especially coming closer to the election, that Andy Worski was specifically in favor of Trump and was specifically in favor of right-wing policies. So I don't think
Okay.
it's
So
I don't think
maybe
it's
the wall and stuff
I
like
think it's
that.
fair to call him,
Immigration.
Mhm.
like a right wing or a more right wing. I would say he's like a center. He was sort of center right at the time.
I think
but
JF is like an ethno nationalist.
Right, but so
okay,
but
Yes,
basically,
yes, yes.
yeah, but basically, what happened with JF was that JF used Andy Worski's larger platform to create blood sports, and then once
Mhm.
blood sports was a thing, JF sort of took over it and made like so much of blood sports about his weird white nationalist garbage.
Mhm.
It's so much so that the show became almost entirely about that, and Andy had almost no place in the show. So basically, JF, hijacked Andy's brand, used it to his advantage, and then, essentially pushed Andy out of his own brand.
Yeah, there was a big blow up over that, I think.
Right, but I wouldn't. I mean, I would say, especially back in 2018, I would say Lawrence Southern seemed to be far more to the right than Andy Worski was at the time. So I just think it's
Yes,
weird
yes.
that he compares them both as like, this is where the alt-right pipeline brought me to, Andy Worski.
What he might be doing is he might be just comparing them at their most right-leaning moments, because
Maybe.
Worski is more right-leaning now than he was 5 years ago, and Lauren was more right-leaning 5 years ago than she is now.
Right. Maybe.
There's
that's probably
another-
what's going on.
There's another thing that happens in this video here where he talks about how he doesn't like tankies, which tankies are left-wing authoritarians. And
Yes.
I often feel like, okay, really what he's against is authoritarianism. He's just conceptualizing everyone on the right as authoritarians, but that's not remotely the case. You have right-wing libertarians that are like, they're so far away from being authoritarian. So
Well, here's the thing. The people who are socialists, they view the left-right scale as not only being a good-evil scale, but they view it as being a liberty-authority scale. So
right.
I've heard
which
Vosh,
is
for example.
a misconception. We all
Yes,
agree on that, right?
I've heard Vosh, for example, say that libertarians, there's no true right libertarianism. It's all just crypto fascism. I've heard people say that the tankies, they call them red fascists because they want to paint them as right wing, that sort of thing.
Fascism is authoritarianism. It's nationalistic authoritarianism.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about fascism, but not today.